Ingvar. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is Doug McCrager, your CEO. We have an interesting program this evening and one that I think you'll all appreciate. Before I introduce the experts on the panel and our guests this evening, I want to express some gratitude to everyone for your generous financial support. And remember, we are a people's movement. We're fueled ultimately by your contributions, and we deeply appreciate everything that you've done for us. We want to tell you that we now have a membership platform, sometimes called a membership portal. This has taken a long time to develop. I think you're going to find it very, very useful in terms of trying to reclaim control of the country. We will launch it very soon as our initial training has been completed, and that means that we've got to get the leaders out there in the various states trained up on it so that they can show the members in their respective states how to use it. And we're starting this educational program next week. It's for all people who love America and are ready to join the fight, obviously. We have 43 state leaders and activists in 1,200 counties, and we're adding more every day. So we hope to cover every county by the end of April. And the platform will then launch across the country immediately thereafter. Finally, just a note on email. We still have members telling us that they are not getting emails from time to time. We ask you to check your spam folder to ensure that you receive the updates. And we have had a few attacks, but we have warded them off. So we're in pretty good shape right now. So check the spam folder. Now, to tonight's panel, let me first of all introduce none other than Ann Vandersteel. She has a show called Right Now. She's the host. But Ann is known for a number of different things. She's a strict constitutionalist and tries to remind people periodically of the Constitution and the body of law associated with it, which is not often enough mentioned. But she has recently become interested in figuring out just how the government weaponizes migrations. She spent a lot of time with John Young down in Darien and looking at the mass migrations into the country and how they're being orchestrated and supported by NGOs, many of whom, if not most, are being funded by the federal government, either directly or indirectly through the United Nations. It's called Burning Edge. And I think we're going to hear more about that from Ann in the future. We also have none other than the great man, Judge Andrew Napolitano himself, the man who instructs me periodically in all matters legal and beyond. He is here this evening to help us understand the weighty subjects. Now, everybody knows that you were with Fox News for 24 years, Judge, but I don't think everybody appreciates your service on the Superior Court of New Jersey. I don't think they know that you're also a law professor, and I'm not sure they know that you are regularly presenting lectures on law at places like the University of Milan. And you mentioned earlier you're going to be in St. Petersburg, Russia as well. Is that not right?
Correct. Thank you, Colonel.
Well, I don't know what will happen when you try to come home after that trip. But if you need an attorney, let me know, and I'll see what I can do. I don't think you will, but you never know in these days. Now, our guest this evening is an important person. She is named Marley Hornick, and she is the Chief Executive Officer of United Sovereign Americans. This is a nonprofit organization. It addresses a very critical need, and that is electoral integrity. She's going to talk tonight about her approach, which diverges sharply from everyone else. Most of you are aware that there have been lots of challenges to elections after the election is over and someone has already been declared the winner. Marley is taking a different approach. She's going to tell us something about that this evening, and then we're going to try and discuss the potential for success. Now, Marley, tell us about the organization and just exactly what you're talking about when you talk about the civil rights aspects, the consent of the governed, and so forth.
Sure. United Sovereign Americans is a 100% volunteer organization, first of all. So we have nothing personally to gain and no horse in any race, no political agenda. We simply want to uphold Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, the right and duty of the people of the several states to choose our representatives and be governed by consent. The issue that United Sovereign Americans has uncovered across all of our states that we have completed where we've completed our research is that we've basically taken an approach to measure the actual outcome from registration through certification, measure the process, the electoral process, and find out what is the accuracy rate of our elections. We have discovered in 10 states voting error rates ranging from 12 to 27%. And meanwhile, you have U.S. congressional races with margins of victory as tight as 0.5%. So the civil rights issue we're focusing on is that these elections appear to have been certified without regard for accuracy or fidelity to our election laws. And in the end result is not that we could say any particular candidate was wrongly certified. The real problem is that no one knows who won in our 2022 midterms or our 2020 general election. And the election officials who are charged with the duty of providing us an accurate, compliant election and thereby upholding the treaty, the United States Constitution that holds all the political action at complete banned.
Has our connection weakened? Marley, can you repeat the last few sentences?
Sure, yeah, I seem to
Marley.
be having some trouble. We have a storm here in New York, so I apologize.
Well, we got some of it, but you just finish up with the last few sentences where we were talking about the people that were charged with the responsibility to conduct the elections that did not offer any validation for the conduct in terms of its accuracy before they certified. That's where we were left, I think.
That's correct. That's correct. And I'm sorry, we're in a storm here in New York, so my connection is a little bit rough. But basically, what it appears to have happened is that millions of votes across 10 states, literally millions of votes, have been cast in the 2022 midterm by registrants that do not constitute a valid identity. They're not eligible and they don't look like they could be real people, according to the state's data. And these databases are protected as critical national security infrastructure and required to be accurate under federal law as a matter of civil rights. That's where the civil rights issue comes in. It looks like massive dilution of the vote. We don't know what the outcomes should have been, but we're supposed to know. We're supposed to not only know, we're supposed to trust in those outcomes, and the officials are supposed to be able to prove it to us. That's like,
So
it goes back to Marbury v. Madison, right? They said a right without a remedy is not a right. If they can't prove that our elections are accurate, then we've been denied the right to choose our representatives.
Now, very quickly, you went through voter rolls and then to addresses in an effort to establish this. Have I got that right?
That's correct. The voter registration list, the official list of qualified eligible citizen voters in each state and their participation histories, is practically the only document that election officials will still provide in an effort to at least give the appearance of being transparent. And fortunately, that document has given us the ability to audit and measure the elections from registration all the way through certification. And for example, as a certification issue, we find in every single state the same issue, that there are more votes counted than voters who voted. And this is in New York alone. There were there were 338,000 more votes counted than voters who voted in 2020 and 35,000 in 2022. They have no idea where 338,000 ballots came from. They don't track back to even a fictitious voter. This is gross misconduct and mismanagement of our elections.
Judge, do you want to pursue this?
I do, because the law is not easy to deal with here. The law would require a demonstration that the wrong person was elected, because the attitude of the judiciary, for better or for worse, is that you're not entitled to a perfect election. You're just entitled to the winner getting the job. So if there were 300,000 votes more than there were voters, but it didn't change the outcome, then the courts are not going to get involved. And unfortunately, as you know, the burden is on you to demonstrate some wrong. But I agree with you fully that you should be able to examine all of this, but there's no mechanism to force the electoral officials to justify their behavior unless you can demonstrate in a prima facie showing that the wrong person won. So have you had any success with that? Or is
Well,
this too new that there aren't enough elections to challenge yet?
I would say this is a different approach than what you're explaining. So the registration lists are basically the spring from which the election flows, right? So you're talking about challenging an election where the river meets the sea, which is basically the end point. It's almost too late, but there's 150 years of Supreme Court precedent around challenging election misconduct. And in fact, there's a case that's still considered good law from 1888 in Ray Coy, where the Supreme Court clearly says that the evil intent of an election official is demonstrated when they disobey the law. And unfortunately, I mean, I hate to be the bearer of this news to our election officials, because I think many of them are trying to do a good job in a very difficult circumstance. But in New York, in Illinois, we submitted 4 million registration violations to the State Board of Elections and requested a line-by-line explanation.
Well, they
And
probably
that's
won't give you such an explanation unless you can show that this resulted in an unjust outcome. I mean, I'm not suggesting that this is
did.
the way it should be, but this is the way it is.
The voting error rate in Illinois' 2022 midterm was 14%. The legal standard of accuracy from the Help America Vote Act is a maximum error rate of 0.0008%. There's no question that there is a dilution of the vote, and the voting system that was used to conduct that election cannot be used for the 2024 election until it is either brought into compliance or they come up with a secondary administrative process that is compliant.
You would need a judicial ruling mandating that, or an act of the legislature mandating that, because you know how lethargic poll workers and election officials are. They're going to do something just because that's the way they've always done it. They will never change what they do unless the law changes or some judge orders them to change.
Exactly. I totally agree. That's why we already filed a temporary injunction against the use of the vote in the state of Maryland, and have retained counsel in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and are preparing to file in those states. And we have 7 more states evidence ready to file in weeks, as soon as we can get counsel and funds to make that a, because the election system as it stands is a lemon. It's incapable of producing an accurate and legally compliant result. And when you have a lemon of a car, you don't bring it back to the dealer and ask the dealer to fix it, right? You bring it to the courts and you demand that you are, compensated for this injury.
Well, Anne, can you jump in here and help us understand the broader implications as well?
Well, I mean, clearly, I've been very focused on the border as of late and looking at the millions of people that have come across under this regime. And we're looking at states right now, including California, New York, Maryland, Illinois, and Washington, D.C., that are all allowing non-citizens to vote in the lower down ballot elections. That's, unconscionable. And the fact, because it does change the voting electorate and the outcome of policies, procedures, rules, laws, et cetera, in municipalities. And that will have long-term effects. But more significantly than that is the fact that they're not even following their own statutes. I'm just going to zero in on Arizona right now. Arizona has statutes, according to the Arizona Revised Statute book, right? These are put in by state legislature that aren't followed at all in terms of chain of custody, ARS 16602, how to count the ballots, ARS 16564. They were not followed in 2022. They were not followed in 2020. Those elections should have been set aside, which means you would have been nullified and you would have had to do a do-over. And if they were, and this is, by the way, with an evidence trail. But what I find troubling is that some of these statutes, which clearly have protests, poll workers signing the tapes under protest, and they wrote right on the tape, their name, signature, signing under protest, was told, I can't count what's in drawer 3. There are too many. Well, the statute ARS 16564 is very specific in that all ballots in all 223 precincts must be counted on site before they're cinched up in a bag and moved to the tabulation center. You can't do what was done. And yet that's not even being argued in a court of law, if you can even call it a court of law at this point. It's administrative court. It's not. So we have so many problems here that when they put rules on the books and they're not following their own laws, how did the citizens, where do we go to defend ourselves?
I don't know what the Arizona system is like, but when I was on the bench in New Jersey, I volunteered for election work because election day is a holiday in New Jersey and the courts were closed and I'd be bored stiff. So I volunteered for these cases. And frequently someone would come in and say they refused to count my vote. Or I saw a pile of ballots in the corner and I don't think they're being tabulated. I would either go to the polling place myself and look at them, or order a poll worker to come into the courtroom and respond to this allegation. And then I would handwrite, because it's election day, the staff wasn't even in. I would handwrite an order requiring these things to be counted. Now, it's not easy to do that. You're talking about it's after 8 o'clock at night. The polls are closed. This lady is saying there's too many ballots in the drawer. I can't open the drawer, but we're going to stitch up this bag anyway. You need a judicial officer who has the authority to stop everything on the spot. Marley, not federal, but local and state, to say, I'm ordering you to stop and not stitch up the ballot and count every ballot and then put it in. Now, not all judges are as activist in the direction of fairness as I was. Some are. It's the luck of the draw as to what judge you're going to get, but that's the way to address this, is immediately on the spot, because judges sit, I assume in Arizona, because they do in New Jersey, 24/7 to hear emergent matters.
Judge, that's fantastic. If only that had actually been pursued in Maricopa County or Pima County or Cochise County, we might not find ourselves with the, whatever that is sitting in the White House. We wouldn't be in this position right now. We wouldn't have these open border policies that are flooding our nation with, folks that'll eventually be, signing up for citizenship through the military and or law enforcement and taking a gun and pointing it at a true American citizen. So we're really in a bad situation right now.
Well, is your organization prepared to do this on an emergent basis in 2024?
Well, my organization
we're preparing.
Wait, it's Marley, please.
Marley, yeah.
We're not waiting until the election. We're not waiting to allow another fraudulent, fictitious election to be administered. We are filing these preliminary injunctions now, because it's clear from our measurements, our careful measurements of the state's official data, that we were deprived of an accurate and legally valid election in 2020 and 2022. So the issue is there is an imminent risk of irreparable injury, right? A TRO, if the same voting system is used to administer the 2024 election. That's what we're fundamentally asking. And our legal approach is designed to get us in front of the United States Supreme Court before the 2024 election and ask one question: is it still right of the people of the United States of America to choose our representative and be by consent? Are we going to law 2024, or are we going to allow political interests, private political interests, con men and self-dealers to keep their thumb on the scale of our country and watch it slide into oblivion?
Well, that's a good question, and we don't have an easy answer, because we have plenty of evidence for people that are poll workers, activists, political workers, And I think the judge would say in some cases, people on the bench that may not be supportive of what you want to do. Am I right, Judge?
No, you're not wrong, Colonel. It's correct. It's going to be nearly impossible to get this before the Supreme Court of the United States without adversity, without a challenge to this county clerk or this state senator was not truly elected. You need adversity of that magnitude, not the system isn't fair, they don't count votes right. No one's going to undo an election that's already there unless you can demonstrate that that person was not accurately or actually
Right.
elected. And then it's going to go up.
I totally agree.
It's going to go up through
We're
the
not
states.
asking for, yeah, but we're not asking for any election to be overturned. We are asking for protection in our 2024 general election. We're demanding and praying that the courts give us the relief to demand that the 2024 election is legally valid, that it follows the law.
All right.
That's all. So we're definitely not asking for any, and we cannot prove that any election outcome in particular was wrong. The question is, can the state prove it? Can the state prove what they certified? And the answer is a resounding absolutely not. They can't.
But no court will make the state prove that unless there's adversity, unless there's a case or controversy. The federal constitution, and as far as I know, all state constitutions require a case or controversy, not we think there may be harm because these people think that 2 + 2 = 22, but there's actual harm that so-and-so in this job was not truly elected. You need adversity of that magnitude to get the courts involved. And once you get that kind of adversity, then your tidal wave of evidence comes in.
But Judge, haven't we tried in the past to prove that adversity?
Well, the Trump people under Rudy Giuliani filed 61 lawsuits and 60 were dismissed. And the one that was not dismissed had to do with, did you have to wear a mask when you were within 6 feet of the poll watchers? It wasn't on the merits. It was on the procedure for monitoring the people in the polls. Right. But all those claims that people voted who shouldn't have, and the result was unjust. Not that they voted and shouldn't have, but it produced an unjust result. Those were all dismissed, many by judges that Trump himself had appointed. My statement is not intended to manifest a lack of agreement with your sympathy. I'm 100% with you, but to tell you how the system is constructed, some might say rigged, to make it very, very difficult to challenge unless you can show that the wrong person is about to be certified because people voted for this person who are not authorized to vote. That level of adversity is what will force the courts to rule.
I agree that this strategy has not been. Yeah, I agree with the judge that this strategy has not been proven in the courts, that there is not clear precedent to claim that the error in elections creates a civil rights injury. However, there is 150 years of Supreme Court precedent upholding the idea of challenging election misconduct. And this is gross misconduct. And our opinion is that this has to be tried. It's the only remedy we believe that has the ability to impact the 2024 general election.
And I agree with Marley on this because we're looking, like I said, I'm actually in a chat right now, is talking with Michelle Swinick, who's out in Arizona. She and her partner, Leo D'Onofrio, who's a constitutional attorney, have looked at this extremely closely for the past 17 going on 18 months. They've done all the FOIAs themselves, limited access to getting the information out, like 4 hours a month or something ridiculous. If they'd had a team of 20 lawyers, they could have done it in a week. But they've looked at all the non-technical statutes, and they can show error after error where these statutes were clearly not followed. And you see the evidence of it under protest with the poll workers that signed off, saying all of this is under protest. Now, why isn't that being acknowledged in a court of law or in the administrative court?
Because the courts are only interested in an unjust outcome. They don't care about an unjust process. So if the voting was
inaccurate, there have been so many rulings through the Supreme Court. US v. Classic
Yeah.
In Ray
I gotta
Coy,
tell you, the U.S. Supreme Court
so
really
many
has.
When you don't have chain of custody, you don't have proof. So
Yeah,
how can
but
you say
wait a
you
minute.
have an outcome when you
correct.
don't
We
have chain
can't,
of custody?
we can't hear. Judge, go ahead, make your point.
U.S. Supreme Court really has nothing to do with this. It's all state law. I realize there's these nice platitudes about fair accounting and all that, and everybody's entitled to the right to vote. And there are some federal regulations and statutes purporting to regulate how the states count. But unless you can show that the wrong person was certified, the courts are just not going to get involved. Now, that's a difficult thing to show. But if you can show it, you will force a judge to compel the poll workers to justify what they did. That recently happened in Connecticut, where a judge was satisfied that the wrong person won, and he ordered a new election. The same person won, but it was a far fairer election.
Okay. Would it interest you? And again, I want to credit where credit's due, because this is not my research. This is Michelle Swinick, who's providing me this information, because she's watching this. And, again, I credit her with the work that she's done. But Arizona Supreme Court, Miller versus Pikachu, 1994, set aside the election. That was Arizona Supreme Court. And this was, again, we have tons of evidence, all credit to them, on the fact that their own statutes weren't followed. You don't have chain of custody. You don't have, you have a number of people that walked in, you have a number of people that walked out, but there's no reconciliation because they didn't track it properly. So you really have no idea how many people voted. And you have people signing under protest, precinct workers saying we couldn't count the ballots. So you really don't have an authentic way to know who actually won. You know how many votes.
The big problem here, in my estimation, is the people that wrote the Constitution, who decided in a rather cavalier fashion to give the states responsibility for the conduct of these elections. Now, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you know more about the Constitution than I do, and you judge as well, but my impression is the reason they made the decision at the time was that the federal government was almost non-existent. It had no money. It had no resources. All the resources and the money were in the 13 colonies. And so the decision was made to let the states bear the expense and conduct the elections. But now, in retrospect, especially when it comes to federal office, in my judgment, it raises serious questions about the validity of the process.
Well, the Constitution's clear. It's supposed to be one day, same day voting, right? We shouldn't have an election season. Florida is one day voting, yet we have early voting going on. We're breaking our own Florida Constitution. It's as if there's no rules. It's just write whatever you want to do. We've got to get back to real law and order. We don't have any in this country. I applaud Judge Napolitano. There's a man with ethics who actually showed up to precincts to review what was going on and say, okay, we're going to do this. We're not going to let you get away with it. We need more people like Judge Napolitano out across the country. But clearly, George Soros has done a really good job of funding a lot of this stuff. Look at all the crooked DAs we have in this country.
The system is, I hate to use the word rigged, but I'll throw it out, because I was able to do this because I had a lifetime appointment.
Right.
And so I didn't care what the Republicans who pushed me into the job, because I was a Republican at the time, thought. I didn't care what the Democrats thought. I didn't care what the editorialists thought, because I had the lifetime appointment. But in 37 states, judges are elected, and they do care what the political bosses and the political parties and even the adversaries think about them. So my behavior was unique, but I was insulated from any political consequences. When she left the Supreme Court, and until a few months before she died, Sandra Day O'Connor was devoted to getting state constitutions changed so that there would be the appointed jurists for life. She didn't succeed in any state. So 37 states have judges elected. Only 3 have appointed for lifetime terms. The most liberal, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island.
Yeah. Well, it's not funny how it goes.
Well, Judge, I think we also need to point out that you were in New Jersey, you are Italian, and you probably had protection.
In addition to the,
I want to say
to the marshals.
I want to address your question, though, Colonel McGregor, about this centralization of elections, because I think our founders were very dedicated to the idea of maintaining federalism and maintaining control at a lower, more localized level over this process. And they were very concerned about allowing centralized power at any point to gain that kind of single control over the system. And
Agreed.
a lot of people are very concerned about the National Voter Registration Act and the Help America
Agreed.
Vote Act because they feel that Congress overstepped their authority. But honestly, I think that those laws at this moment are helpful. They are passed under the necessary and proper clause in order to protect Article 1, Section 2. So when the National Voter Registration Act says you have that the voter rolls have to be accurate, it's actually a civil rights law. You have a civil right to an accurate and current voter registration list. When the Help America Vote Act says you can't have more than 1 out of 125,000 ballots in error tabulated in this system, it's a civil right. They can't take that away from you. And that's where the Supreme Court really does have
Well,
a
Marley,
role
I
as
think
matter, because if
everyone,
those laws are being violated.
well, Marley, I think you'd find that I'm sure in the audience that's listening, as well as the rest of us, we're 100% behind you. And I wish that we could do more for you. And I wish you well. And we'll support you in whatever we can. But we're going to have to move on to the next topic. But thank you, Marley, for coming this evening and telling us about this fight, which is so important to the nation's future.
Thank you, Colonel. Nice to meet you, everyone. Thanks.
Okay.
Pleasure, Marley.
Bye-bye. Now we've got another topic that we really do need to address, and it's not far from the Constitution either. And for your information, it looks like to many people that we once again in this country are on the threshold of a war. Now, we thought we were in Ukraine. Miracle of miracles, we've managed to avoid that to this point. And that's not because of anything we've done, obviously, because of the restraint that's been exercised by the Russians. But now we're in a different ballpark. That's the Middle East. Many, many more players, many, many more interests. It's hard to chart a course through this very, very difficult area. And there we face the possibility that what has happened recently, not just in Gaza, but now with the expansion of the war potentially to Iran, that it could blow up and become a regional war that even has the potential to be global, given the interests that the Russians have, their close relationship with Iran and Hezbollah, as well as the Chinese, who have investments in Iran and are trying desperately to expand those and depend upon the oil and gas that comes out of the Persian Gulf. And they obviously are not the only ones. So what I want to know now as an answer, and please, the two of you, maybe you can help me understand this. Why is there no debate about this? There is no debate. What's wrong with us? We used to debate these things very, very ferociously, in fact. There were so many people opposed to war beyond our borders for 150 to almost 200 years. Why is there no debate? And why is the public apparently somewhat complacent? They don't seem to want a debate. Am I wrong on that?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all, Colonel. I mean, there's no debate because the Congress is monopolized by the War Party, which is 90% of both houses of Congress, irrespective of the party that you're in. There are some conservatives and libertarians on the right, and there are some progressives on the left that oppose war. But the vast majority, because of the military-industrial complex, which finances their campaigns, and because in the case of Israel, the donor class, the vast majority are uniformly in favor of this. The House of Representatives is going to vote this week on $61 billion for Ukraine. There'll be less than an hour of debate with 435 members, and it will be utterly meaningless. They debate in segments of 1 minute. You get 1 minute to talk. The next person gets 1 minute to talk. It's an absurd system, which the framers could never have envisioned. Moreover, everybody looks the other way when the president manipulates the military. You know this better than I. Without the consent of the Congress, we all know that there are troops in Israel. We all know that there are troops in Ukraine. They may not be in uniform. They may look like CIA agents, but they're there. Congress has never authorized them to be there. And the other issue is there is no draft, so nobody's really exposed to this. You're not going to see the type of massive opposition to war the way you did in Vietnam, because kids of your generation and mine were being drafted. It's reprehensible that so much power has fallen into the hands of the president. The Congress has abnegated its duty under the Constitution to let the president do whatever he wants. And in the case of Israel, its extraordinary use of money has an iron grip on Congress, which is what allows Secretary of State to certify under oath that we have to spend this money. It's an emergency for American national security, and it's going to Israel. I wish I could have 10 minutes to cross-examine him under oath as to how money going to the Netanyahu government is because of American national security. Once he makes that certification, he can bypass Congress. That statute is unconstitutional because the Constitution says only Congress can declare war and no money shall be spent except what has been appropriated by law and recorded in a public treasury. Appropriated by law and recorded in a public, as I say, treasury, public journal. Neither of that is the case when Tony Blinken signs these emergency declarations.
Well, and do we in fact then not have a Congress that maintains and funds and supports the armed forces? We simply have presidential forces. The president has carte blanche.
I mean, that's basically what it looks like. I mean, let's be honest. According to the statutes, DC is a federal corporation, and it has been manhandled by, globalist interests now for decades. There's really no secrets there. You've got a Federal Reserve, which is not federal. There are no reserves. Our banks are bankrupt, and yet these are the same people that are waging war against the countries that aren't members of their central bank club. We're, as I said off camera, we're spreading our bombs of democracy into countries because we're bludgeoning them. They won't join us. Remember Hillary Clinton? We came, we saw, he died. That's right. We had to get rid of certain people because they were going to go onto their own gold-backed currency. They didn't want any part of what we have here in the United States, which is a corrupt international banking cabal that is controlling our entire federal government, and they've managed to get themselves down into the state and local levels.
Yes,
the federal money that just
I agree with everything you're saying. When Hillary said, "We came, we saw, he died," it's a very profound statement because she tipped her hand.
She did.
That's when she and Barack Obama decided to use our friends in Langley, the CIA, to kill Colonel Gaddafi. Because
That's right.
if he used the military, he would have to either get a declaration of war or he could use them for 180 days under the War Powers Resolution, but he would have to report it to Congress. But using the CIA, he didn't have to report it to anybody. We all know, the public doesn't know, but the three of us do, and many people watching us now, that the president has a private army.
That's right.
They don't wear a uniform, although they do wear fatigues, and they have the same weaponry as the real army, but they're his to send wherever they want. Wherever he wants. They're called the CIA.
That's
and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton used that to slaughter Colonel Gaddafi, and that was the boast, the disgusting, despicable boast that she made, which you, Ann, just so nicely quoted.
Yeah, well,
how do we address this with the American people? How do we get them to understand that what happens with Iran, that what happens between Israel and Iran has implications far, far broader than anything we've seen to this point in Iraq or Syria or anywhere else, that potentially we could find ourselves directly confronting Russian armed forces. And that also could escalate to the nuclear level. People here don't seem to think anything bad can happen to the United States. How do we correct this misunderstanding?
Well, first of all you have to do is go down to the southern border and you see exactly what is bad that is happening to the United States. I've seen it with my own eyes, and millions of people have. The reporting, and I applaud Fox News for sending Bill Melgen down there and actually reporting on it as well so people can get educated. There's 50 terror cells in all 50 states in our country right now, and there's a lot of bad hombres that are here to do bad things. But the thought of Russia going into true mutually assured destruction with the United States is reaching, for me, However, I do see them having to try and maintain a lid on what looks like to be a choreographed dance between Iran and Israel right now. And when I say that, it's because, again, the central bankers are desperate at this moment. You've got 95% of the world's population joined to BRICS, which controls 75% of the world's gross domestic product. We are at a loss. When I say we, I mean the proverbial central bankers in Western countries run by corrupt criminal cabal governments. The people are just unfortunate victims in all of this. But we don't have to be victims anymore, Colonel McGregor and Judge Napolitano. We have this beautiful document, the Constitution, and in there is that add water and stir recipe called the Declaration.
What you just said so articulately, most of the public is ignorant of. And the Colonel's question is, how do we cause the public to know the liberty that has been lost stealthily? Now, our country, our choice is a means to achieve that, but it's going to take a long time. It's 330 million Americans. The election's in 7 months. I know a lot of people think that Donald Trump, if elected, will be such a disruptor to this deep state and to the status quo that is enough of a reason to vote for him. There are many, many people, libertarians, progressives, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, who hate the central government and who believe that. I fear that it'll be co-opted by them, just like all of his predecessors have.
Well, Judge Napolitano, we still have the Second Amendment right to defend ourselves.
Yes,
not go on offense, but go on defense. And part of a defensive strategy, which becomes offense, is you can offensively not comply with any of it, because we do not have a representative form of government. We do not want another $60 billion being sent to Ukraine or any money going to any endless wars. We didn't get a say in this. We didn't vote for any of that. Do you know $20 billion would end homelessness in this country, yet we can't redirect any money here? We never finished the border.
We have a government that is utterly controlled by the donor class.
That's right.
Whether it is in behalf of a foreign country, or whether it's in behalf of the military-industrial complex. I disagreed with John McCain on many things, but one of the things I agreed with him on was money is the destruction of the idea of representative government. I don't know what the answer is, but money in politics is the destruction of representative government.
That's right. Well, when you started paying them a lot of money and you started writing in the laws so that as soon as you started to campaign for a senator or congressman or whatever, that you could start to use your donations for your campaigns as your salary towards the purported job you hopefully will be elected into, that created the list of people that'll just run for the sake of running. They don't care if they win, and they'll be willing to overlook statutes that should be held up in a court of law to prove that the election should be set aside because it wasn't followed according to their own state election law statutes.
Right.
So we have,
Colonel, I don't know how this ends, but these conversations, in my view, are very helpful because they will illuminate to the thousands and thousands of people watching us the gravity of the problem.
That's right.
Listen, when I listen to the two of you, I'm inevitably reminded once again of Oliver Cromwell's speech to Parliament when he decided to dissolve it because it was so hopelessly corrupt it couldn't possibly govern the country. And he asserted his power, and they said, well, how are you going to have the army govern the country? And his answer was, gentlemen, the army is the country. It is the people. We're a long way from Cromwell, we think, but maybe not so far.
I think we're closer than you think, sir.
Yeah, and we should consider that very carefully as we launch here into the future. Well, listen, you two have done a brilliant job. I'm so glad that you were with me this evening, and we have thousands of people watching. All the comments coming in are extremely positive. And you've done a great job this evening, both of you. I think Marley did too, in educating us, because it's the sort of thing that we don't get from the mainstream under any circumstances. You've educated us about the legal implications and about the truth of how things are actually done in Washington. The more of that people hear, the more chance there is that the people themselves will assert themselves and we can get out of the mess we're in.
Well, Colonel, let's do it again.
Okay, we will. We will, Judge. My best to both of you. Thanks so much again, Ann.
Thank you.
Tremendous job, and I'll see you soon.
That's right.
You look great, by the way. I'm not supposed to say that. I guess that's sexist or something. I'm sorry. That's the way it is.
It's the bright blue.
And Judge, don't be jealous. You look great too.
For my age. Thank you, Colonel. We'll see you next
We're
week.
hanging tough. Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.